Hey, everybody, welcome back. Gabriella Huffman here to help you study for your North Carolina real estate exam. The next video series, we're going to focus on Chapter 7, which is a very big chapter for your test. It's all about agency, brokerage, and how we work with clients, customers, and other real estate agents. So let's go ahead and get started. In your book, Chapter 7 is called Real Estate Brokerage and the Law of Agency. Because this is such a large chapter, I'm going to break this down into 5 separate videos. So just pay attention when you're looking. You'll see this will be video 1 of 5, and the next video will be video 2 of 5. So you can see which video series we're going to talk about what topics here. So we'll start with agent duties, and the next video will be about agency, then types of agency, the working with real estate agent brochure, and then a little review of the nature of the business. So this is video 1 of 5. So we're going to talk specifically about agent duties. We're going to define a client and a customer, what our duties are to those two, and some prohibited practices. So a client or principal, as you may hear, is who you represent. And we'll talk about how that representation is created in another video. Customers are also called third parties or prospects. Go back to your book and you'll see that prospects is in italics. That's a really good key there. Anything in italics, parentheses, bold, the commission's telling you that this is important. So you want to make sure you highlight that. So your customers are those that you do not represent. So if you just keep in mind from here on out, the agent works for the client, and we'll describe those duties here in a minute. And an agent works with the customer, So when it comes to confidential information or personal information, make sure you write that down. Those two are the same. There's some rules here. So as an agent, you may not disclose your client's confidential information to anyone else without their consent. But an agent must always disclose the customer's confidential information to their client. So remember, you work for the client. You cannot tell any of their secrets to anybody without their consent. But if you hear about the other side's information, the enemy, that's your customer, then you must tell your client. So here's an example, a traditional example here. House is listed with ABC Realty. Jeff is the listing agent at ABC Realty who's listing this house. Susie is a buyer's agent with XYZ Realty. Susie has a buyer that is under contract with Jeff's listing. Remember, listed with ABC Realty. So Jeff's client, who he works for, is the seller. Jeff's customer, who he does not work for, is the buyer. Susie, on the other hand, her client is the buyer. Her customer is the seller. So if Jeff learns anything out about his customer, the person he doesn't represent, in this case, the buyer, he must tell his client. So if Jeff overhears that the buyer can actually pay more for the house than what they offered, well, he's got to tell his seller client. Anything Jeff finds out about the customer, he must tell his client. And the same thing's going to be for Susie. If Susie learns anything about her customer, in this case, her customer is the seller, she must tell her client buyer. So if Susie finds out the seller's motivation to sell, Susie must tell her buyer client. So this example, you'll notice that there are 2 different firms. So 2 different firms is going to create that client-customer scenario or client-customer relationship. So here are your duties. As an agent, when you have a client principal, you owe them, your book gives you this acronym OLDCAR. So make sure you know what each letter stands for. To third parties, people that you don't represent, you owe them honesty, fairness, and disclosure of material facts. I underline disclosure for both just to show you that in both situations, whether you have a client or customer, you must always disclose material facts. There are 15 prohibited acts that a licensee can be disciplined for, and the 15 here are the ones that we really focus on in class. The ones that are in red with a star are the ones that are highly tested on. So I would definitely go back to chapter 7, which are also in Appendix A, and reread all of these prohibited acts, especially the ones that are identified in red with a star. So, prohibited acts or conducts can be broken down into 4 different categories. You probably remember reading this from chapter 7: willful misrepresentation, negligent misrepresentation, willful omission, and negligent omission. And what I do with my class is I make it pretty simple. When you see the word willful, from here on out, think the agent knew about a property defect, for example. Okay. On the other side, negligent would be the agent did not know about a property defect or a zoning change and should have known. Misrepresentation, the agent spoke or lied about what they knew or didn't know. And omission is they forgot to mention, they left something out, or didn't say anything at all. So you can see here, willful and negligent are on the left side of the screen as whether the agent knew about it or didn't know. Misrepresentation, omission are on the right side of the screen, whether the agent opened their mouth and said something or didn't. So when you read a scenario and they ask you which prohibited conduct this is, keep it very simple. First, ask yourself on the left, the agent knew or did not know? And they'll tell you. And then look on the right, did the agent speak or did not speak? When you break it down to simplistic terms like this, you'll always get those questions right. So there is a difference between misrepresentation and puffing. So misrepresentation is lying about a property defect, hiding something. Puffing is just a complete exaggeration of the property's description or feature in an advertisement, saying it's the best house on the block, versus misrepresentation is saying, no, the roof doesn't leak when you actually know that it does leak. So, when it comes to material facts, your book does a really good job describing this. So, keep in mind, it doesn't matter who you represent, you have to tell everyone about material facts. It is your duty as an agent to disclose material facts to clients and customers, not when asked, but as soon as you find out about it, you need to talk about it. So these 4 here are just defining what a material fact is, how you categorize it, or how do you know it's a material fact, and how do you know to speak about it. So your book does this very well. Here's some examples of material facts that your book talks about, and I highlighted in red the ones that are typically seen on exams. Stigmatized properties, on the other hand, are not by law required to be disclosed. Go back to your book and you'll look for psychologically impacted. That's another word in there that they're using on test, which also means stigmatized. So, not required to be disclosed. However, if the agent wants to voluntarily disclose, if asked, they may, but they have to answer truthfully. Some examples of stigmatized properties would be hauntings, crime scenes, crime happening, death, sex offenders. So that's the last of video 1 of 5. So make sure you come back to check out more. We're going to talk about all the different types of agency, dual agency, sub agency, and how brokerage in general works out.